Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of RPGs with Paddy. I'm Paddy. So today we're going to continue with the new Gamemaster Month program. This website takes us through the process of learning a new RPG system in January and running our first session by the end of the month. If you're joining us late, don't worry. It's easy to catch up and still run to schedule if you want, or you can start now and go at your own pace. The posts should remain up on the website all year, I think. But if you can join in January, you can benefit from the community on Facebook and Discord as well. And just before we begin, I want to remind you that most of the groundwork that we're doing now, we only do this once. This is not just prep for your first game, but for all games that you will run in your chosen system. So don't feel like you have this much work to do every time before a session. In particular, the combat in RuneQuest is a little bit difficult to get your head around at the start, but once you get it, then it'll be good going forward. So yeah, please don't be put off by what we're doing now. You chose a system, an RPG system that appealed to you, so keep going with it because the world always needs more game masters. So check out the website, link to the website in the description below, and let's get started. So encounters are the scenes that take the RPG away from just being a story and turns it into a more interactive experience where the player's choices matter. This is where you present a situation to your players and they decide how they want to proceed. So the website here gives us a few examples of what encounters might be, but really an encounter can be anything. So the examples they give us are: the characters kick down the dungeon door, find a monster within, and fight it to get the treasure. Or the characters are in a busy market when a beggar attempts to pickpocket them. The Duke summons the characters to carry a message of peace to his rival. The characters have come to a rocky ravine in their travels. Is it just a difficult climb, or are there enemies waiting to ambush them while they are vulnerable? The characters break into the office of an erstwhile employer, searching for papers or other evidence of the employer's true motives, and so on. Encounters are how you will spend most of the time in your games. The parts in between encounters generally don't need too much attention. You can kind of speed through them. Things that kind of connect the different encounters, such as traveling from A to B or just time passing. Now, before we get into that, there are a few places where you do want to give these in-between points a little bit of attention and time. For example, when you have a rest at night or something like that, it's good to give the players a little bit of time to flesh out their characters and build the relationships in the group. Also, if you are introducing a new setting to them, for example, in a new fantasy world, describing the world a little bit can help. So when they arrive in a new town, maybe you just describe a little bit what's going on. But, of course, even with this, don't drag it out too long. Don't monologue too long because you want everyone to be involved in this. But generally, anyway, encounters will be the main part of your game. So down here at the bottom, they have a nice hint, I think, or a tip. Generally speaking, the higher the proportion of encounter time to non-encounter time in your game, the better the pacing is likely to feel. So that's all we get for the start. And after listening to encounters, now we're going to do a little bit of a 180. And now we're going to go back and talk about rules for our chosen setting. Okay, so for Numenera, there are three things that we want to read, well, and a fourth part really, but three parts about the rules and one part about the setting. So first we'll read very briefly, just pages 116 and 117, learning about some different actions we can take. Then we'll skip ahead to page 119 to 120, and again, a little bit about actions. And finally, we will look at experience points and leveling up in pages 122 to 128. So after that, we'll then look at part of chapter 10, which will tell us about the location that we will be playing in our introductory scenario, Taker of Sorrow. So let's head over to the PDF now. Okay, so we already know about basic actions and attacks, but now we're looking at what they call activating a special ability. So there are three types of this, really. There is esoteries, there's a character's focus, and something from a cipher or an artifact. So again, if you have, well, you should have this book as well, but if you want to know a little bit more about these, you can find them here on these pages. But very quickly, esoteries are when you use a Numenera to reshape the world around you. A focus is a special trait each character chooses, and it should be different from the other players in the same group. Probably we'll be going through some character creation a little bit later on, so that's when it'll come up. And ciphers are usually small, but single-use Numenera that you will find regularly throughout the game. So if you're using this special ability, if it affects another character, a friendly or an enemy, in an unwanted way, it's treated like an attack. So it will have a difficulty rating with it. If it doesn't fall into that category, then the action does not require an attack roll. Usually it will just happen. However, there may be some cases where a non-attack roll, again, it's the same kind of roll, will be needed. And that will be specified by the action in question. So after that, we get on to the action move. And we have spoken about movement before, but basically you can move within an immediate distance and complete another action. So in combat, all melee combatants are considered within immediate distance of each other, unless the GM rules otherwise for some reason. If someone is not engaged in melee but still nearby, they're considered short distance. If they're further away but still part of the combat, they are at a long distance. So in a round, you can move up to a short distance, but terrain may affect this. You can try to move a long distance, which is up to 100 feet or 30 meters, but you have to pass a speed test with difficulty 4. If you succeed, it means you covered the distance. Failure means you either fell at some point or you just didn't make it the full distance. So, just skipping ahead to the next section, we talked about deciding the turn order in combat. But if it's your turn, you might want to wait to see how things play out, or to wait for the effect of another character's actions to take place. If it's your turn and you want to wait, you will give some kind of trigger as to what will prompt your action. So, for example, after someone uses that cipher, then I'm going to step in while they're blinded, or I'm going to wait for the enemy to come out behind the rock, and then I'm going to, shoot my arrow at them, or whatever it is anyway. Now, the book doesn't specify, or certainly I couldn't find it, what happens if the trigger doesn't happen. So I'm going to shoot at the person behind the rock as soon as they come out to shoot. If that person never comes out to shoot, then what do I do? So that is why the new GM month community is really helpful. I asked in the Discord group, and people were giving me their experienced answers as GMs of Numenera. So if you have any questions, hop on into the Discord group or the Facebook group. You can get this great information. And the consensus was that if you decide to hold your action for a trigger and that trigger doesn't happen, then you just don't take your action. You are focused on something that never happened in the end, so you lose your action. So as a new GM figuring this out, I might try to do it in both ways in action, so with my players, and see which one flows best for my group. If you're doing this, just be open with your players about it. It's unclear in the rule book, and I want to see what plays out the best. But once you've decided which one is best for your group, be consistent with the ruling from then on. Equally, if you come across a rule in play and you're not sure how to play it, it's usually best to make a temporary ruling on it just to keep the play going. And then you can consult the rules after the game or in a break. So another action that you can take is to defend. But this is not in place of your other action. Basically, when you are attacked, you get to try to defend yourself. And again, it's not an action you choose to make. It's just going to happen when someone else attacks you. It never takes up your action. The roll the PC will make depends on what kind of attack was coming their way. If an axe was being swung at them, then the PC can use speed to try and duck or block it. If they are hit with a poison dart, they can use might to try to resist the poison. And sometimes, obviously, you might have two defense rolls, one to block or dodge, and another to resist some other effect, for example, poison. If you don't know that an attack is coming, you can usually still try to defend against it, but you can't use modifiers or skills or effort to reduce the difficulty. It's just set at whatever difficulty the GM sets at the start. You can't change it. And it's written here, and I actually can't think of any reasons why you wouldn't do it, but you never have to defend. You can always just accept the attack, which will then automatically hit. And finally, very important, is the action do something else. This allows the players the freedom to think of their own actions or use the surrounding environment to their advantage. Once the player has announced what they want to do, the GM will decide on a scale of 1 to 10 how difficult that task would be, and then the player can try to ease the difficulty as they normally would with any task. And this, I love this because it's a very simple system. It's the same system we're using for almost every role so far in the game, and it can be applied to any situation. So whatever the players come up with, you're like, okay, that sounds like a difficulty 5. What are you going to do? So there's no need for complicated calculations or looking up obscure rules. Just think about how difficult does this seem? Do you have any modifiers to make it easier? And then roll. Okay, so the last part of the rules for this session is about experience points. So if you've played some other RPGs or almost any computer RPG, you'll be familiar with XP. But in those games, it usually comes from killing monsters or even from chapter milestones. In Numenera, however, you get them by discovering new things and from GM intrusions. So we get a little bit of a reminder about GM intrusions here, in case you've forgotten. The GM will offer the player 2 experience points for an intrusion. If they accept, they immediately give 1 of those XP to another player and keep 1 for themselves. If they decide to refuse the intrusion, they have to pay 1 XP to the GM. So here we've got 2 examples. I'll just read through them very quickly. Example 1. Through skill and the aid of another character, a 4th tier PC player character reduces a wall climbing task from difficulty 2 to difficulty 0. Normally, they would succeed at the task automatically, but the GM intrudes and says, no, a bit of crumbling wall gives way, so you still have to make a roll. As with any difficulty 2 task, the target number is 6. The PC attempts the roll as normal, and because the GM intruded, the character gains 2 XP. They immediately give 1 of those XP to another player. And the second example, during a fight, a PC swings their axe and damages a foe with a slice across the shoulder. The GM intrudes by saying that the foe turned just as the axe struck, wrenching the weapon from the character's grip and sending it clattering across the floor. The axe comes to a stop 10 feet, 3 meters away. Because the GM intruded, the PC gains 2 XP and they immediately give 1 of those XP to another player. Now the character must deal with the dropped weapon, perhaps drawing a different weapon or using their next turn to scramble after the axe. And finally, remember, not outside of the example, if a character rolls a 1 on a die, the GM can intrude without giving the character any XP. This kind of intrusion happens immediately or very soon thereafter. So, discovering things is the essence of Numenera. Generally, it's not just about locating something, but about figuring out how it works, getting something working again, or even learning how to turn something off. And it says here, the common thread is that the PCs discover something that they can understand and put to use. The actual details of XP per item and discovery are given here. So for artifacts or other devices as well. But ciphers and oddities do not provide XP. So you'll find lots of ciphers that you will try to use a lot, but they won't be giving you any XP. So if an adventure has a focus which is not so much based on discovery, but rather on other tasks, then the GM should reward XP based on completing those tasks. So the rough guide given is 1 XP per game session, and all characters would get that. Equally, the players can set their own goals, and they will be rewarded with XP for completing these. This is a great idea, I think, that can really help build up the characters and their backstory. And I absolutely love this inclusion. Players always want to get more XP to become stronger, better, or have more options. By allowing them to set their own goals based on their character's personality and history is just going to lead to great role-playing. And XP, experience points, are meant to be used. And if a player ever has 10 XP, they are forced by the GM to spend some immediately. So, how can you spend XP? Well, there are 4 ways to do it. Immediate benefits, short or medium-term benefits, long-term benefits, and character advancement. And it's really easy to remember how much each of them costs. Immediate ones cost 1 XP. Short or medium-term benefits cost 2 XP. Long-term benefits cost 3 XP. And character advancement costs 4 XP. Very simple. So for immediate benefits, you will spend 1 XP to re-roll any dice, any roll in the game, and it doesn't even have to be yours. So if another player rolled badly, I could spend 1 of my XP to allow them to roll again. And this can be done multiple times for the same roll, but you might want to be careful about spending too many experience points just on one single task. And as mentioned earlier, you can also spend 1 XP to refuse a GM intrusion. And on the other hand, short and medium-term benefits mean you can spend 2 XP to gain a skill or ability that will provide a short-term benefit. So I'll just give you the example here because I think that kind of makes it very clear. For example, let's say that a character notices that all the locks in the Citadel of the Iron Saint are similar to those crafted by a locksmith who worked in her village when she was young. She spends 2 XP and says that in her youth, she visited the locksmith and learned the inner workings of these locks. As a result, she is trained, remember that can reduce the difficulty by 1, she is trained in picking the locks in the Citadel of the Iron Saint. This is just like being trained in lockpicking, but it applies only to the locks found in that particular location. And finally, the skill is extremely useful in the Citadel, but nowhere else. So medium-term benefits are similar, and you still spend 2 experience points, but it's a slightly more general ability. So for example, when a character is climbing through the mountains, she might say she has experience with climbing in regions like these. So now, after she spends the 2 XP, she is trained in climbing those mountains. And this will help her now and anytime she returns to the area, but she's not trained in climbing everywhere. It's only in areas like this. And finally, it says here, in rare cases, a GM might allow the players to spend 2 XP to develop a new tool or a new skill just for a short time. And the example they give is kind of piecing together different Numenera to make a contraption allowing them to breathe underwater, but it will only hold together for a certain amount of time. Long-term benefits should be discussed with the GM and probably involve integrating the game mechanics with the story. So here is an example. A Jack named Theric spends a long time posing as a librarian in a huge library in the river city of Charmond, so he can intercept messages secretly disseminated from the head scribe to a group of criminals. During that time, he becomes very familiar with using a library. Terex player talks with the GM and says he would like to have the Jack's experience have a lasting effect on the character. He spends 3 XP and gains familiarity with research of all kinds. So that's just an example. But there are also some long-term benefits that are story related and that they won't actually cost any XP. We won't go into them here because we're just running a one-shot, but do have a read of these examples. Like you might get a contact, a new home, gain wealth. So have a look at them when you have the time. And finally, the last way to spend XP is character advancement. So there are 6 tiers, like levels, in Numenera. And to advance from one tier to the next, you have to complete 4 steps. Each step costs 4 XP. And you can buy them in any order. The sample ones, the standard steps, are increasing your capabilities. So you will add 4 new points to your stat pool and allocate them as you like. The next step is moving toward perfection, where you add 1 to your might edge, your speed edge, or your intellect edge, and it's your choice. And the extra effort is where your effort score increases by 1. So that's going to allow you to try harder, make extra effort, decrease the difficulty level of something even more. And finally, your skills. You can choose one skill other than attacks or defense. You will become trained in that. If you're already trained, you will become specialized. But if you have an inability in that skill, the training will cancel that out and you will just have no bonus or penalty to that skill. So those are kind of the standard steps that you can choose, but there are also some other special options. And any of those, which are here, can replace any of the standard 4 steps. There is a little bit of advice here for GMs to maintain tier balance between players. But it's explained that it's not actually necessary or too important in Numenera, because whether you go up a tier or you're advancing your character in some other way, you won't necessarily be behind just because you're at a lower tier. And players should feel free to upgrade their character however and whenever they want, as long as they're not stocking up more than 10 XP. So finally, we're going to look at the setting for our adventure, which is the Navarene. So Navarene is one of the largest and richest kingdoms in the Steadfast, and it's not much liked by its neighbors. So here is a map of the Steadfast, and we can see here up at the top is the Navarene. If we scroll down, now we're going to get just a zoomed in map here. So the Navarene is ruled by Queen Armalu and has a population of about 1.5 million, with the capital city Charmond over here. So the queen lives here in her palace called Empeternal House. It has some weird sealed chambers which she never leaves, but it kind of allows her to stay alive longer, and she is currently 253 years old. So Navarene is the most northerly point of the Steadfast, and the Amber Pope has declared war on the people north of the Steadfast. So the northern part of Navarene, near the Tithe River, up here, has lots of castles and forts, while the south is more full of rich farmland. In the west, we have the Westwood, which is filled with ancient redwoods, and one in particular is called the Emperor of the Green, is twice as tall as the others. In the east are sawmills that export lumber from the country as one of its prized exports. The Westwood used to be feared, but the Navarene wanted to make roads through it, and in doing so, they kind of awoke an enemy. Not the ghosts or the tree spirits that people used to fear, but the Kolovas. And if you want more information, you can go and see about the Kolovas here. But generally, I would think of them as gigantic spiders. So the capital, Charmond, is well built up and has many statues and monuments, and it is called the second largest city in Navarene. However, I couldn't find any reference to the largest city, And talking in the Discord channel, people were a little bit unsure. Maybe it's a typo. Now, Sharman might be the largest city. Not so important anyway. But the population is about 95,000, and it's home to the Queen, who lives in a fortress. And this fortress has very powerful defenses from Numenera, but it seems like they're kind of starting to lose their power. The city also has one of the best schools in Steadfast. Bodrov is another key city, and it has a great unique defensive position. It has a very narrow base that widens up to kind of a plateau where the city is located. The route up goes through some tunnels in the base, but there are many extra tunnels, so many ways to get lost. So all of this makes it very well defensible, but difficult to live in. And the population is only about 1,000, but there is room for maybe 10,000 there. There is the vacant palace there, which is the holiday home for Queen Armalu, but she has never been there. Shalamus is called the City of Echoes and has about 80,000 people, and it's famous for both its merchants and its thieves. The Provani family, one of Navarene's aristocratic houses, lives here. The city is surrounded by walls and towers, and it's called the City of Echoes because randomly in the city, people will hear echoes of past events, like recent past events, and they'll also see kind of like reenactments of recent past events as well. So no one understands how it works, some kind of Numenera. The ruler of the city, Argust Provani, has a group of city guards, but he also has secret agents called the Shadowlings who infiltrate criminal organizations. So finally, there are two kind of mysterious structures here. The Amber Monolith, which you can see here, and was part of the intro at the start of the book, if you read that. And also the obelisk of the... I'm sorry, there it is. The obelisk of the Water God. So the Amber Monolith floats above the ground and is said to have some kind of teleportation device somewhere inside it. But it is guarded by soldiers working for the Order of Truth, the Amber Pope, and no one is allowed near it. The obelisk of the Water God is clearly related to the Amber Monolith in some way, but nobody knows how. The obelisk somehow draws water from nearby into itself from the nearby river, but it's been doing this for, maybe 1,000,000 years, and the river hasn't run dry yet. So there must be some kind of way that it's coming back. The obelisk is about the same size as the Amber Monolith, and it floats above the ground in the same way. So that is all the information we have for Numenera for now. So be sure to check out the next video, which will be coming very soon. Sorry for the delay. And yeah, we'll take it from there. All right, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.